We're about to do a live Q&A. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Okay, a lot of these are love, so I guess we can start with love because a lot of these are about
We're gonna talk about love.
We're gonna talk about love first. Is there a way to become more empathetic, emotional, and sensitive? If so, how?
Is there a way to become more empathetic, emotional, and sensitive? I think the way to become more empathetic, emotional, and sensitive is to first and foremost have empathy for yourself. I think we judge ourselves and we don't give ourselves a lot of space to make mistakes and a lot of space to correct those mistakes and correct the behaviors that got us into certain situations. And I feel like when we give ourselves empathy and compassion, we also expand our capacity to give it to other people. I think everything starts with how we treat ourselves. I think the love that we have for other people is a reflection of the love that we have for ourselves. I think the trust that we have for other people starts with the trust that we have for ourselves. I think the empathy, like you said, it all starts with us. So if we could really look at ourselves and be honest about the things in ourselves that we are uncomfortable with, or the things that we hide from, or the things that we run from, and instead of running and hiding, we actually shine light on them and pour love into them, I think we'll be able to shine light on and pour love into other people.
I think that's a good point, like starting with yourself first, because what I'm kind of realizing more, like I can't really say I consider myself somebody who fully is like loves themselves or is fully comfortable, but I'm like, it's like something I'm actively working on. So like what I'm kind of learning is like that the old cliche saying of like, well, how you treat yourself is, how you're gonna treat others. I used to think that was like more so bullshit, but like now I'm starting to see it for like the amount of room, the more patient I am with myself is the more patience I realize that I give other people. I kind of realize when I show myself how to love myself, like for one, it kind of shows me the love I deserve because, for a long time, I guess, when you live by other people's standards or you live by, other people's standards of love, you kind of, how can I word this? You kind of sorry, I'm actively thinking about it now.
That's
I think
okay.
I just contradict.
No.
Starting with loving yourself because,
I think it's okay to have it be a question, I think it's okay to not have a solid answer on it. But just to elaborate off of that, I think when you try to love people in response to them instead of in alignment with the way that you love yourself, then the love becomes conditional. And I think when you start with loving yourself, that's the only way that you're ever able to give other people unconditional love. Because when you love yourself, it really forces you to be honest, to see all of your flaws, to see yourself in totality. You realize there's no good and bad. Like, I've played both roles. I've been the good guy. I've been the bad guy. I've broken hearts. I've got my heart broken, And so I can't go into the world knowing that about myself and go judge other people for what they do. I'm not loving them in response to their behavior. I'm loving them because I see them as part of myself. I see them as an extension or a reflection of me.
Okay. Well, that makes me curious though, because like I kind of believe the same thing, but like for instance, I have a friend, and you know the friend too, and ever since we kind of had like I kind of saw how he seems to be a person who loves himself and he's comfortable with himself, so he's kind of like gave me this whole new perspective, which is why I have to think about it more, because this is somebody who, at least from my perspective or from my knowledge, is comfortable in themselves, do love themselves, or at least they think they do, but they still find themselves unable to like express any emotion outside of like a positive emotion. And that makes me feel, well, you know, of course they can give love, they can show love, but only so much.
Right.
There's a cap to it. So then now that makes me think, well, they're asking how can you be more empathetic? And if we start with yourself, what about somebody who is comfortable with themselves but still struggles to convey or express their emotions? What do you think would
But
prevent
it's like, how comfortable are you with yourself if you don't feel comfortable enough to express or convey your emotions?
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest things I had to learn how to do was to just be angry and allow myself to realize and accept and understand that rage is not a negative emotion. It's just an emotion, and it's just as valid as love. It's just as valid as any other thing. It's just as valid as me, you know, hugging you. I could yell at you too. One is not worse than the other. They're both coming from, they're both coming from the same place. They're different sides of the same spectrum, but they're not separate. And I think that's what we have to realize, and we have to give ourselves space, because when you cut yourself off, you limit access to those emotions. You're limiting access to an entire part of yourself. It's like cutting off your arm. Well, without one of my arms, I'm not as mobile and as functional, you know? So moving through life and interacting with people, I'm not gonna have the same mobility, and I'm not gonna have the same function. And just because I appear to be, you know, good on the outside, and I wanna protect this good guy persona and this like loving persona, like that's not realistic. Why would you have these emotions if you were not supposed to be able to access them? That range is necessary. It's necessary for contrast. Without darkness, there is no light. Without light, you know what I mean? It's like you have to have the contrast of
Both
both.
sides.
Yeah.
I was in the Ubers, we were talking about Ubers earlier, and it's interesting because like the one, I guess, thorough conversations I've had in the Uber was with this guy, and he was telling me about like how he came to LA, he had this tech business, and then like he had investors, but I guess the investors ended up like pulling out last minute, and his entire business like kind of fell apart. But I was like, well, the Uber driver was like, you must be angry. He was like, yeah, I'm pissed. But off his demeanor, you wouldn't tell that it was angry. So I asked him, I was like, well, you don't seem pissed. And he was like, no, I'm pissed. Like, I acknowledge that I'm angry, but it doesn't mean that I have to let that anger, you know, take over.
That's an interesting point.
And then when he was explaining it to me, he was telling me about how it's kind of how I have the same philosophy now, is that he was like, any emotion, whether it be happiness, sadness, anger, whatever, it's always fleeting, because these emotions are things that just spur up in a moment. Like if you jump off something right now, you're gonna experience thrill, but that thrill doesn't last forever. You finish the jump, you get to the bottom, the thrill is over, and then you go to find something else. And he was like, these things like anger, when I get angry, it's gonna flare up. But what he does is he acknowledges that he's angry, and he lets it flare up for however long, like maybe it's a few minutes, that he's like pissed, livid. But then after that, he then chooses how to navigate through that emotion, rather than, because he kind of says that people, I've always said like people kind of make themselves angry. You know, somebody comes and pisses you off right now, you're mad, but then you're gonna be calm after like a few minutes. You're not mad for the entire day.
Right.
The reason people stay angry
It's like you're replaying that
you
in
go
your
back,
over and
you
over.
remind, you feed it, and then
Right.
and if that's the case, if you can feed that anger to continue being angry, then you have just as much power to feed like something
Right.
more productive of like, I know that I'm angry, but I've acknowledged that I'm angry, but I don't want to be mad all day.
Right.
So there's then the difference between anger and being upset. I can be upset all day, but me being upset doesn't affect everything around me. When you're angry, any room you walk into, people are automatically gonna know, what's wrong, what's going on with you. When you're upset, you can be upset and go through the entire day. Nobody's like noticing. And even bigger than that, you're not letting that anger take a major effect on yourself. You're processing it in a healthy way, you're acknowledging it fully, but you don't let that emotion control you.
Right. And I think you bring up a good point when you talk about acknowledgement, because it's the acknowledgement of the emotion that allows you the space to transcend it. I think when you acknowledge something, you're able to look at it from an objective standpoint. You're giving yourself the space to put it outside of you, so you don't have to identify with it. I think oftentimes people identify with their emotions, and so they stew in them. If they're sad, they stew in that sadness because they take that sadness and make it part of their identity.
I'm a sad person.
I'm a sad person,
Right.
instead of being able to look at the sadness.
The person who's
Look
sad.
at the thoughts that keep repeating that are causing you to get back to that sad place. And like you said, focus on other thoughts. Focus on affirmations. Focus on things that are going to uplift you and remove, and just give yourself space from that identity of sadness or anger.
So I have a question then,
Sure.
because you brought up thoughts and like kind of, I guess, choosing more productive and deliberate thoughts.
Yeah.
So, you know how our brains work is that there's always information going through it. There's always thoughts that are flowing. Like, I kind of realized your brain is never going to not work. And like for a long time, I thought I was an overthinker. So I tried to quiet my mind, especially from like anxieties or like feeling anxious in general. But then like the more I'm kind of like looking at it, I'm realizing your brain is never going to not be working. Like, even if I sit here and I stare at this blank wall, eventually my mind is going to start coming up with things about the wall to think about.
Right.
So it's like, so then how do you then, if all of these thoughts are going through your head, the good ones, the bad ones, how do you then choose or know what thoughts you can trust?
That's interesting.
Yes, it's hard for me because and I think that's where a lot of like a lot of my anxiousness comes from, is like I'm kind of obsessed with doing things the right way.
Right.
So it's like I have one thought telling me, oh yeah, this is great, and then another thought is like, maybe not.
Right.
And I'm like, well, they're both my thoughts.
Yeah.
So which one do I choose to embrace consciously?
I feel like, I feel like it's kind of abstract, but I don't really know how else to put it. But for me, it's really energetic and emotional. Sometimes thoughts can be, like you said, contradictory. Things don't always make sense, but I have learned how to get in tune with my gut and my instincts, and I feel very deeply, in that area. Like when things are for me or when things aren't for me, there's an anxiety around it. When I know I'm doing something I'm not supposed to be doing, like literally, like my heart starts beating faster. I feel it. I feel it in my body. When I'm around people who make me uncomfortable, I feel it in my body. When I'm making a decision that isn't aligned, I feel it in my body. And so I think it's really just getting in tune with your instrument and realizing that you are an instrument, and that they say your second brain is in your gut. But in order to access it, you have to just have awareness of like your feelings. You have to be able to be honest with yourself and not have everything all in your head. You have this whole body that was made for senses and experiences, and I think so often we just limit ourselves to our minds. But that's still, it's hard. Like that's still so hard. It's like,
because they're still there.
I'm still human, like I'm still here, like, I haven't completely transcended the bullshit, so it's like.
I think the way that the best thing that I've been able to do to like kind of get past the anxiety of having all these thoughts is not so much thinking about, well, which thought can I trust or which one do I acknowledge, but more so like, I guess in the same way trusting my gut, but more so just acting in whatever I'm most comfortable in.
Right.
And then also not beating myself up if I do end up regretting that decision. Because I think it's like the fear of, I know when I do something wrong, I know I'm going to beat myself up and other people are going to get beat on me. So it's like it's really that fear of doing the wrong
it's
way.
Less about doing it and more about the repercussion.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Like,
but if you alleviate that when you're like, I'm not going to judge myself.
Then it's like,
I think you give yourself space to do that when you do think about it consciously. When you do think about like the fact that, okay, I have two choices and I'm making a conscious decision to do this. And whether it leads to a good place or a bad place, it came from a conscious place.
Right.
And so when I get to the end and I see what the consequences are, I know that it was a choice. And knowing that it was a choice lets me know that I have the power to make another choice. I think people act out of impulses that are not necessarily healthy for them. And instead of really observing the choice, they just go for it. And then they beat themselves up in the end, and they don't see that they have the power to make another choice next time. They don't get the lesson out of it. But you get the lesson out of it, and you just alleviate all that guilt. Because it was like, I made a conscious choice. At the end of the day, whether it was good or bad, it was conscious. I have the power to change it. This shit is temporary, reroute.
That's actually good. I wish I had all my books. I could write these down.
Aren't you recording this?
Facts. I'm bugging out. I wish I had my books so I could write down these gems.
Oh my God.
Technology, 2019. All right, let me see. Let's segue to another question. What is your biggest philosophy for life thus far?
There's so many.
I know.
Oh my God.
I guess which one would encompass the main perspective you lead with? So before we give our answers, I guess I can share an answer that I got because I asked a similar question to this. My friend Matt, the director.
Yeah.
I was talking to him the other day, and I had asked him. I was like, "Well, what do you want out of life?" And he had said, "I've already gotten everything that I can out of life." And I was like, "That's impossible. You're only 20 years old." And he was like, "I know it sounds impossible. It's like it's almost asinine for me at 20 years old to say that I've gotten everything that I want out of life." But he was telling me I've had the perspective people usually have is that, oh well, to get everything out of life I have to climb the highest mountain and I have to swim in the deepest sea. It's always we have to fulfill all these extremes.
Right.
And his perspective is more well, if I've done enough to where I feel fulfilled, I've traveled, with my family, I've found love, I've fallen in love, I've been heartbroken, I've experienced a wider, pretty much the entire range of emotions with people, I've had insane conversations, I've grown and I've learned, I've gotten everything. And then his philosophy was now that since I've been given so much, I've gotten so much from life, the only thing I can do now is give back. So his perspective is that there are things that in life that you're given and there's things in life that you take. So for instance, whatever lifestyle you're born into, you might be born rich, you might be born poor. Say you're born into money. That's something that was given to you. It was out of your control. Right. But let's say you grow up to be a successful businessman, you're very wealthy, you buy all this property. These are things that you take from the world. And his philosophy is that so long as the sum total of what you've been given and what you've been taken doesn't outweigh the total of what you've been given and how much you've taken doesn't outweigh how much you're giving back, then you will live a fulfilled life. So in that, I used to kind of look at rich people. If I see somebody pull up in a Ferrari, automatically I have this predisposition of what this guy might be like.
But you don't know what they've contributed to the world.
Yeah, it's he bought a Ferrari. He must have all this money that he's wasting. How can you spend $500,000 on a car when there's people starving? But it's also he kind of showed me that, a rich man who spends $500,000, even these rappers who we always kind of down and say, oh, you guys are buying chains. They can buy chains if they want to. So long as what they're giving back, what they're putting back into the world outweighs what they're taking. Buying a chain for $50,000 when there are people starving, you're taking something from the world at that point. But you don't know if this person, they might have given $500,000 back into the world. And not to put a monetary value on what you can give, but you don't know what he's done for the world that has afforded him the balance of being able to afford these things. Yeah. So it's a matter, so his philosophy was more I've been given, and I've taken, and now my only objective is to give back more so it outweighs everything I've been given and everything I've taken.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess my philosophy would be similar then. I think life is about passion, purpose, and service. I think when you can combine your passion with your purpose, then you will be of service to the world. For me, my passion is art. My passion is modeling. My passion is acting. My passion is self-expression. My purpose, my purpose is big. To me, my purpose is about reconstructing the self-image of Black girls. My purpose is about liberating Black people. My purpose is about rewriting the narrative around Blackness. My purpose is being a multidimensional representation of Blackness. And I'm of service because I'm able to combine my self-expression and my art and my modeling and my acting and any other medium that I do with activism and fighting for freedom and the liberation of my people. And that's doing a service not only to Black people, but all people and to the planet. I've realized that what a lot of this comes down to, what a lot of this just really intense destructive energy comes down to is exploitation. It's the exploitation of women. It's the exploitation of Black women. It's the exploitation of individuals who don't have the power in society to stand up for themselves. It's the exploitation of natural resources. It's the exploitation of just who we are as a people, our dances, our culture, our music, the food that we eat, everything. That we are robbed of everything. The planet is robbed of everything. Africa's been robbed of everything. So like you said about giving back, right? So I guess my goal in this life is to give back and give back more than what I've received. And I received so much in whether it be money or accolades for like modeling, acting, whatever, but that's not what's important to me. What's important to me is what I'm able to give back. And I want to be an ecologist. Like I have goals that are beyond even the entertainment industry. Like I want to go to Africa and figure out what type of vegetation grows there so I can help to replant Africa. Like I want to fucking plant trees. Like, you know, I want to clean up the air. I want to clean up the oceans. I want to find ways to recycle. I bring my own bags to the grocery store. Like and that's not how I was raised. Like, I'm trying. I'm really, really trying here. I'm really, really trying here. So yeah, passion, purpose, being of service. And I think the way that you find your passion, your purpose is through self-love. And I feel like that's sort of another conversation too, or like another philosophy that feeds into that one.
I was gonna ask about that. Because you were speaking on purpose, and I know a lot of people, at least for most people that really like don't know what their purpose is. I kind of see a lot of people do what they're good at. You know, might be good at videos, I might be good at modeling, so I'm doing what I'm good at my entire life. How do you know when you found your purpose or when you're moving in alignment with what you're meant to do? Okay,
so I watched this show called Chef's Table. And Chef's Table it's a great show, but the plot is the same every time. Basically, it's about these chefs. They're very, they love cooking. It's what they're good at. And, they might open a restaurant or get to a certain point in their career as chefs. And then they sort of hit this wall where it's like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? It's not rewarding in the way that I thought it would be, even though it's what I'm good at, even though it's what I wanted to do from the time I was young.
Right.
It's not rewarding. And then they have to go face themselves. And that's where it gets interesting. Oftentimes the chefs have to go back into their history, look at where their families came from, look at where they came from, and see how that legacy informs what they are creating. And it's from that legacy informing what they are creating that they're able to find passion around what they're doing and fulfillment around what they're doing. And I think that's the hero's journey. That's very much my journey as a model. Modeling was something I wanted to do from the time I was a kid. I used to sit in front of the television and watch America's Next Top Model. when I was little. And then I turned 18 and I was on the show. And then I moved to New York at 19. And then I lived in New York, but then somewhere around the end of 2015 and the beginning of 2016, I decided I don't like this. This doesn't feel good. Every day I'm going into work and I'm being told that I'm not good enough. Every day I'm going into work and someone's putting a flat iron in my hair, even though clearly it's damaged and it's breaking, and you have the heat turned all the way up, and I'm sitting in the chair feeling like I just want to shrivel up and disappear, cringing at the fact that when I know I get home, there's probably going to be gobs of hair. You know what I mean? Just like I'm deteriorating internally and externally because I'm trying to bend to the ideas that everyone else has about me instead of figuring out what legacy am I carrying and what legacy am I bringing to this space that's going to help propel me forward and make me passionate again and make me feel fulfilled. And that's when I decided I don't want to straighten my hair anymore. I want to wear my natural hair. But that journey, that was, like I said, ended 2015, beginning in 2016. So it's been 3 years. And I feel like I'm just now in a place where I can say, yo, I'm really, 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 really comfortable with myself. There's probably always going to be things that I need to work on. There's always going to be more spaces, more places, more things about myself for me to love and embrace and discover. But, 3 years of figuring out who I am outside of other people's expectations, 3 years of figuring out who Ebonee Davis is, where does Ebonee Davis come from, what does Ebonee Davis mean to the world, where do I fit into this greater pattern. And it takes so much acceptance, it takes so much acknowledgement until you're able to transcend what you find. Because when you look at yourself honestly, you really see your reflection for the first time. That's not the prettiest.
And you really like, my friend calls them spirit eyes. I don't like the name.
Spirit eyes?
I don't like the name, but I like his point that he kind of told me that there's kind of these experiences that happens to every human being, and we kind of call them midlife crises, but really it's kind of like almost an awakening. Something happens in your life that forces you to really look at life for what it is, not just for what's directly in front of us, what we get caught up in, work and school, and really realizing I hate that I keep repeating it, we're really human beings, and there's something larger happening here, and even beyond that, really starting to understand yourself and understanding how the universe works within and through you. And I think that's why I kind of get on the topic of purpose a lot, because then it's like, I feel like once you start to kind of look at the world in that way and kind of realize yourself, well, this is not something I'm comfortable with, or the job that I thought was my dream, I'm here now, and I'm kind of realizing this is not me, this is not who I am, and it's almost as if the only time I can function in this space is when I put this mask on, I put this face on. I was watching this Jim Carrey interview, and he was saying that's why a lot of people in the industry, or even in life, get so depressed, because you get up every day and you put on this facade of who you are, or you put on these masks of who you have to be for somebody, for or whatever setting you're going to be in. And eventually your body gets tired. It's like, I literally, some days, you think it's sadness, but it's really I literally cannot get up today.
I'm so tired of playing this role. I've played this character over and over and over my whole life. Which is something so profound and something that I really learned in my training as an actor. It's like, I always say this, but actors be the realest niggas because you realize that everyone else around you is acting and you're just keeping it real. You are actually in touch with your emotions. I know how to go into any situation, whether it be real or imaginary, but my emotions are coming from a real place. They're coming from an authentic place. Everyone else is kind of just playing a role, whether it's the role of mom or the role of dad or the role of daughter or the role of boyfriend or the role of girlfriend. It's like we're given these scripts through films and TV, and everyone just reading off the same script, and it's like, no wonder you're sad.
Right. And that's interesting because I'm 21 and I just had an actual conversation with my dad maybe last year. And I realized it was because for the last 20 years, my dad has been playing this dad role of who I have to be for my son.
Yeah.
And if I finally got to a point, I felt so alone. I felt alone through high school. I felt alone through my college years, becoming a man, because even though me and my dad are cool, there's love there. We don't have a distant relationship, at least not physically. Emotionally, there was this gap because there was always these roles of, okay, let me be the son and let my dad be the father. And we just kind of go by society's ideas of how these things are supposed to operate.
Right.
And it wasn't until I hit a point where I realized it's beyond you being my dad. It's
you're human, first of all.
You're a human being, and now it's I want to know your history. I want to know what's made you who you are, and kind of having such a human conversation with my dad was the first time I didn't feel alone, because I realized you're me.
Wouldn't it be so much more effective if we looked at people as humans and individuals rather than who they are in relation to us,
right?
You're free. You don't have to play a role for me. You're human.
Right.
When I came to that realization, it liberated me and it liberated everyone else around me, because it's I no longer have expectations for you. My mom wasn't really there for me as a kid, and I wanted her to be really, really badly. And because of that, I ended up really, really hurt. When I came into this awareness and this awakening, I realized, she's her own human. She never healed from the shit that she went through.
Right.
Why don't I show her some love? Why don't I show her some compassion?
She's still growing.
Why don't I be there for her? She's still growing. She's a baby spirit. My shit is
facts.
ancient. She's a baby spirit, bro. I'm old as fuck. I'm way older than my mom spiritually. But why don't I look at her as an individual and as a human being instead of my mom? And in that way, I free her, I free myself, and we can have a different type of relationship that just allows for space,
and growth.
Emotion, growth.
Because that's important.
Why am I demanding that from someone? That's audacious and it's corrosive.
Corrosive is a good term, because we don't really take into account how messed up it is. Even just with parents, with your friends, we're accepting of the fact that our friends are still growing as people.
Right.
They make mistakes. Okay, all right, we'll work through it. But our parents just have to be these perfect.
They have to be perfect.
Okay, you're a dad now, so that means you figured out life, and now you're just kind of showing on me. It's these people are still growing. We learn every day in every instance. I am not the person I was yesterday, and tomorrow I'm not gonna be the person I am right. 5 minutes from now,
I'm older now than both of my parents were when they had me. And I'm still figuring it the fuck out. So how dare I judge them?
Well, you talked about being older than your mom spiritually.
Yeah.
So you believe in reincarnation and souls kind of coming in and out of this world and learning?
I do. I
have a theory in life for that. So,
tell me your theory.
So I'm not gonna say it's something I believe wholeheartedly, but it's definitely something I'm looking into. But I was raised Seventh-day Adventist, which is basically Christian. So I was raised to believe in the Holy Trinity. God sent Jesus down to save us our sins. He's gonna come back one day. Da, 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 da. But the more I kind of got older, the more it didn't really add up to me. And then I had to leave the church because I felt like a hypocrite. I felt like I was going to this place every day and people were telling me things that either I didn't believe fully or I was pretending to.
Right.
And then I wasn't learning anything because you can't learn anything from somebody you don't believe.
Right.
So I had to leave, and then the more I started to look into these other religions, I stumbled on the idea of reincarnation. And basically the concept that makes the most sense to me right now is the older and younger souls that all kind of exist on this plane. So when a person dies, their shell, let's backtrack. Where I got the theory from was my friend. She told me, she's very attractive woman, this black girl, great skin, great hair, amazing body, whatever. And we were talking one day and she was telling me I feel like I was a man in my past life. but not just any man. Like I was a man who attracted like women, like, and I think that was my one vice. I still had the same soul. She was a very kind person. I was still a kind person. I'm sure. Like I still had all my great traits, but I think my one vice in that life was that I did not understand how to respect women. I was a womanizer. And then she said, I feel as if I was born into this body now in my next life to learn from that lesson, because I now attract the same type of man that I was. So when she said that, I kind of started to look at life. I like lessons, these are all lessons, like there's a lesson in this life that you like to learn. And now it makes it harder for me to be angry at people as much, because it's like, I don't know what lesson you might be. I might be on my 500th life. Like you ever meet people just kind of like, they seem to understand some shit, and you're like, how are you so patient? Like how are you so kind? And like they don't even know where it comes from. They're just naturally that way. The way it kind of makes sense to me is that like they've already lived a life where they learn patience. They've lived a life where they learn kindness. Like they already have that instilled in their souls.
Right.
So now you might be a person who's, like I said, lived your 500th life. You're so enlightened. You understand so much about the world, about how to treat people, about yourself. Whereas somebody like Donald Trump or something might be on their first life, and they're so full of anger, and they're so inconsiderate, and we're angry at them, looking at them like, bro, how can you be this way? And it answers the question of why does evil exist in the world.
But I mean, just on the topic of that, and I might lose some followers over this, but if you're here to learn, then you're here to learn. But through my own self-discovery, like I've said, I've played the good guy and I've played the bad guy. I've played both roles. I've broken hearts. I've gotten my heart broken. I've been a source of evil. I've had other people do evil things to me, and I realized that these are patterns. These are patterns that are passed down to us. I realized that so many of my behaviors came from childhood trauma, and the way that I was treated as a child, and the way my mother was treated as a child, and the way her grandmother was treated as a child. And all of those behaviors were passed down to me, and now I'm able to see them, I'm able to confront them, and I'm able to make a different choice. Not everybody has that level of self-awareness, and I didn't have that level of self-awareness a few years ago, and I would only hope that somebody would show compassion to me and try to teach me how to become more self-aware rather than judging me for those things. And so I really don't feel like it's our place to pass judgment on people despite the behavior that is obviously horrific and disgusting. It's disgusting behavior, but I understand it. I understand human conditioning. I understand patterns. I understand that we have flaws in our lineage, and the experiences of our ancestors are literally passed down in our DNA, and we have no choice but to behave in the way that we are conditioned to behave until we are able to have enough space and enough self-awareness to look at ourselves and understand ourselves and realize that we have a choice. But that takes compassion, that takes empathy. It literally takes people loving you too. It takes people loving you. Like, I didn't come to this place by people beating me up and judging me and calling me names. I came to this place because people loved me, and people told me I was good enough, and people told me I would be okay, even when I didn't believe it for myself. I don't think hurt people too. That's the other thing. It's cliche, but it's real. Hurt people. That's literally what it comes down to. Is there any justification for that type of behavior? No, I'm not here to justify it. But what I will say is I understand it.
That's a better approach.
And there's no excuse. But I can provide understanding.
That's fair, and I agree, because in the same way that you're saying there are older souls and younger souls, like it's the same way where I wouldn't be mad at a kid.
Right. I literally look at Donald Trump and I'm like, you are a toddler throwing
like a
a
kid, like
tantrum.
for real, and there's so much, and that makes sense, because it's like a kid will not grow into a healthy person by you telling them everything they're doing wrong, screaming in their faces, like
shaking them, like putting them in time. No.
It just makes them more like defensive. They're gonna be more belligerent, because it's like now they feel attacked, and when you feel attacked, it's harder for you can't respond to being attacked with like, oh, let me be calm. It's like,
Right.
I'm not going to defend myself. Like,
Right.
if I see you coming at me, like, you're going to punch me, like, I'm not thinking of how I can peacefully resolve this. I'm first thinking of how am I going to retaliate?
Because now I'm scared.
Now I'm scared.
Now there's fear. Now
Right.
fear is involved into the situation. You're threatening me.
So what do you do then? Because I can understand approaching, I guess if we're just going off the whole Trump thing. Let's say he was like just a regular person walking around, but still had that mindset. And I think actually a lot of people we come into contact with are like that. They have very
Right.
toxic mindsets, and they walk around thinking like this is okay to walk around like this. You know, it's one thing for you to say, okay, I can approach you with compassion and understanding, but what do you do when somebody like that is not even willing to hear? Like they're fully convinced that they're fully comfortable in their toxic behavior and mindsets.
Right.
What do you do, especially when somebody like that is in a position of power where they affect others?
Whew. Do you have an answer?
So when I think about somebody like that, the first person that comes to mind is a rapper. And I'm not going to say I have the best answer because it's how do you talk to somebody who doesn't want to listen? But at the same time, it's not so much, I think it can't be so black and white. It's not how do I talk to somebody who doesn't want to listen? It's how do I speak to this person in a way that they will understand? So it's learning. It's not just me speaking in the way that I want to. I'm not just going to give you information that I want to.
Language.
Let me understand, how do you take in information? Because I'm sure that there isn't anybody on this planet who just doesn't want to hear anything.
Right.
It's a matter of, well, how are you saying it to me? If you're screaming in my face, I'm not listening to you. If you're shouting at me, I'm not listening to you. If you come to me personally, no matter what it is, if you can look me in my eyes and, hey man, let's have a conversation, I'll sit down. I'll talk.
I agree with that.
So then it's a matter of, well, studying someone, and that even plays into love. I'm reading this book called The 5 Love Languages.
Yes. Okay. Yes. This is it. We're getting somewhere.
It plays into love because
it's love. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, it plays into love because it's like
wow, love is the answer.
facts. But there's so many more specifics to love. So it's like, so you love your partner, and a lot of us wonder why our relationships don't work out, or why can't I communicate with my partner? I'm doing so much for them, I'm giving them so much, and we give, but we give in the way that we are used to giving.
Right.
We don't consider this is a whole person with their own perspective on love, their own background. They may identify love in a different way than you do. So how can you say you love this person if you're not willing to put in the work to give the love in the way that it will translate to them best?
Miles Carter, everybody. Miles Carter, everybody.
I'm back now. I'm here.
Oh, man.
I think that question comes up a lot with long distance relationships.
Interesting.
A lot of people ask me, well, how do you know how do you make a long distance relationship work? And I think it is that language, because personally, I know I'm not good with long distance, because I know that the way in which I give love, for one, I do acts of service. I do things for people to show that I love them. But secondary is also physical touch. I love to be physically intimate. I like to touch, hold, grab, all of that. Both of those are things that I cannot do from distance, especially the physical part.
Yeah.
And I have to admit that in myself, that because this is a way in which I like to give and receive love, like no matter what you do, no matter, you could tell me how much you love me every day, you could send me gifts, you could write nice letters for me. If I am lacking that physical touch, I will always feel like something is incomplete.
Right.
And that is beyond anything that is out of your control. So it would almost be wrong for me to engage myself in a relationship knowing that this person is barred from really loving me the way I'm meant to.
Wow. So there's a responsibility on you.
Absolutely. Knowing yourself.
Knowing yourself.
How can you see? Knowing yourself.
Right.
You have to know the type of love that you need. Not the type of love you want, but the type of love you need.
Right.
And sometimes it's harder to admit, because a lot of things that we need, we don't want to admit we need.
Right.
We'll go out and we've got relationships. Oh, this person talks to me nice. Oh, they hype me up.
Or we kind of just base our needs off of social norms and what we're told is acceptable, and a lot of it has to do with things that are rooted in material goods. I think the checklist that we're given is oftentimes rooted in material things, and it's not rooted in those deeper, more meaningful things. And I think we have to do the work to go inside ourselves and figure out which of those meaningful things means the most to us. You know, because someone can be perfect on paper.
Oh, facts.
There's a lot of perfect on paper people. There's a lot of people who have their shit together. There's a lot of people who can
or compatible.
Are compatible, but it's like.
I've had that. I've been talking to a girl one time where it's like I'm talking to my boys about it. And they're like, bro, why aren't you dating her?
She sounds perfect.
And I'm like, in my heart, I know something's missing, but it's like I'm tripping myself up.
I feel like those are the hardest situations, too. Those are the hardest situations.
Like, because she's beautiful, you know, she's ambitious. She's like, everything you need, everything you think you need,
right.
They have, and you're wondering, why can I connect?
Right.
If this is everything I thought that I needed.
It's like, didn't I ask for this? Am I just an asshole? Like, yeah, you just beat yourself up about it.
So I guess that leads into the question then of how do you know when a partner is right for you?
For me, it's so spiritual.
Yeah.
I feel it.
It's a running theme.
It's everything is spiritual. Everything is spiritual to me. Like everything. Like the spirit world to me, even though I can't see it, is more real than the physical world that I can see. Everything I can touch still is less real to me. Even though I can feel this rug, it's not even real to me because I know that there's an actual energy about the rug, and that's what I like. I walked into the store and I was like, that's the rug that I want. And it didn't really have to do with the rug, it was the energy of the rug. You know what I mean? The energy of the rug resonated with my energy. That shit, the waves came together and was like, oh, we making music. You feel me? It was a song. It was poetry. And that's kind of how I feel with people too. That's how I feel with how I make friends. That's how I feel with dating. It's like there is a certain level that people meet you on energetically, and you feel it just like in your spirit. Like there's no question about it. And I think the person can come in a physical form that you might not expect. My best friend, I don't know if I'm her best friend.
Yo, thanks.
But my best friend, because I don't expect shit from people.
Right.
Like I don't love them in relation to how they love me. So my best friend is 44 years old, Vietnamese, and lesbian.
Right.
And that's not who I expected to be my best friend. And her name is Christiana. And in my mind, that's like the closest person to my heart. She's actually my agent, so she might see this, but she's like the closest person to my heart. Like I love her so much. That's not who I expected to be close with. You know what I mean? I think we gravitate to people who resemble us physically, but I think it's so much deeper when we gravitate to people who resemble us energetically.
So how did you get in tune with their emotions to when somebody what this means? A lot of people don't even realize they're talking about energy when they are talking about energy. Like one thing at least people minds always talk about is vibes. Like I want to catch a vibe.
Vibes.
But then you start talking about astrology and energies, and they're like,
people
what?
Are like,
Nah, fuck that. But it's like, bro, you were just talking about vibes. Like
that's
energy. You walk into a building, you walk into a party.
How does it feel? Does it feel good or does it not feel good?
Are you comfortable? Like you can't tell why. It's like it's
Are
really
you closed off? Are you opened up?
I remember the first time my eyes got open to energy is I think it was last summer for real, where it was a link up. I had a kickback with my friends, and we had a kickback the same night before, and the same people were coming back again. And it was the first night was beautiful, probably like one of the most memorable nights of my life. And all we did was sit and listen to music and drink and whatever.
Yeah.
So the next night, same vibe, everything is set up. Everybody was there. We were lit. We were live. But one of the girls had brought another friend with her, and we're all open, whatever. Come on in. But we're not. I'm gonna say we're not. I guess we're not regular people. Like we have weird conversations. We watch weird shit. We like weird people, And it's like for some reason this girl was just not fucking with anything we had to do. Like the music we were playing, she didn't like the conversations we were having. She didn't have any interest in taking part of it. It was like this one person shifted the entire energy of the entire room. Like now,
Yeah.
because everybody felt the tension. Like now, we were less comfortable being ourselves. We were less comfortable. It was like it's
You're afraid of
crazy.
being judged. Yeah.
And it's crazy how all of us are already friends. So you would think that even if it's just one person, we're fine. They can be the outcasts, but
yeah.
we become the outcasts when one person's energy comes in.
I've realized something recently. This theme of polarization. And I've realized that when people are not integrated in themselves and they don't accept the multiple dimensions that exist within themselves, then they polarize everyone around them. And they force people into corners, they force people into boxes, they force people into smaller versions of themselves instead of being the fullness, the full range of who they are.
What do you mean when you say polarize?
When I say polarize, I mean, say if, good and bad, dark and light.
Opposites.
It's like, pick a side.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
It forces you to just pick a side. It forces you to get into a box. It forces you to shrink yourself. It forces you to be small.
Right.
And I think people come into situations not realizing that they have this energy that's very, very polarizing. And people are afraid of being judged, and so they just pick a side. They put themselves into a box. They shrink themselves. This is who I have to be in order to protect myself, because this other side of myself is vulnerable and might get hurt by you.
Not allowed here. Yeah.
It's not safe in this space.
Word.
And also when I say polarize, I mean it's like me versus you, or like us versus them. It creates that type of energy too, where it's like, here's this girl who comes into this space with this energy, this attitude, and then the rest of the group is on the other side, whereas you guys were all just meshed and cohesive.
And that's I think this might lead into like a weird part of the conversation, but like
has any part of the conversation not been weird?
So like I have also a weird theory that's not supported by any science, and don't quote me, but I almost believe that human beings have limited themselves by fitting ourselves into these boxes so we can understand.
Yeah.
Because the way I kind of realize how we do things is like, well, we look at what's around us, and in order for us to put words to it, to understand it, we create these polars of, okay, this is possible and this is impossible. So now we've ingrained in ourselves like, okay, this ball falls, when I drop this ball, it's going to hit the ground because of gravity. And gravity exists because of this. And because of gravity, this ball cannot stay in the air. I cannot fly.
Right.
And it's almost like I kind of view the human mind as something that is like...
We have to have concrete ideas about everything.
Everything. Yeah. And it's almost like, well, what was the world like before we limited ourselves? And it's crazy because like in order to understand more, we are limiting ourselves.
Right.
So it's like
it almost contradicts. It's like it's working backwards. It's like I'm trying to gain more knowledge, but in doing so, I'm limiting my knowledge.
It's almost like when you put words to something and you take value from it because you are now describing it. You're now describing what it is.
Yeah,
it's
like
like
experience it.
Exactly. You're not just letting it be.
Right.
In order for you to like, and it's like, look at all these things. I think we had a conversation previously about like, how can we, when we talk about God, how can we define God with words when God existed before there were words?
Right.
We developed words to explain God, but how can something that was before words?
As soon as you put it in a box, it dies. It's like as soon as you pull a flower out of the ground, it dies. Why not observe it, for what it is? And just appreciate it for what it is.
Like, all I know is I'm here, and I don't know where I came from, and there might be something bigger, there might not. I don't know, but instead it's like, no, there has to be something bigger, and this is what he has to look like, and it's almost like, I kind of feel like the way religion kind of developed is that, there was a point when nobody knew anything, and nobody knew anything for a fact. There were no facts. All there were theories. And I think there were a couple guys who just kind of had these different ideas about what the fuck was going on. And one guy was like, I feel like there's a guy in the sky, and I feel like if I pray to him every Saturday at 5 o'clock, then I'm good. And there was another guy like, I'm not really much of a praying type, but maybe if I fast, maybe if I don't eat. So there's all of these different interpretations of course, like each human being is different. So there's no way two human beings are gonna have the exact same perspective on anything. There's
Right.
no possible way.
Yeah.
So then it's like we can admit that we're so different and so unique, and we love that about ourselves. We love our diversity. But then when it comes to God and bigger topics, we have to be monolithic. We have to fall into,
Right.
oh, God has to be this black and white. It cannot be. It's like when
I mean, two people can be standing side by side looking down the street and be having two completely different experiences
entirely
based on what their eye is drawn to, based on past experiences, based on
Exactly.
perspective, based on their favorite color that they might see, what they think is beautiful, something that stands out to them. It's like, how can we say what any one thing is definitely?
And that plays into so much. It plays into beauty standards, because it's like we live
Right.
in a world where it's like, oh, you're ugly. It's you're ugly rather than I'm not attracted to you.
Right.
You know, it's like I
Be
feel
accountable
that-
for
Yeah.
your emotions instead of projecting shit onto the world. It's like you are taking in information, processing it, and then creating whatever idea you have around it. So why don't you, instead of projecting that idea onto the world, be like, yo, I had a part in processing this information and
Right.
coming up with the output that from the input. So I'm accountable. This is my perspective. This is my opinion.
You don't assert your opinion as fact.
Right.
I think that's a problem. Everybody feels a need to be right.
Right.
Sometimes it's almost like it's out of love sometimes, because it's like, well, if I found this connection with God and this is the way that I got to it,
I want to make
I
sure
wanna
everyone
share it,
else.
you know? I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
for
this
sure,
is how I
for
did
sure,
it, so
for
yeah,
sure.
come do it too. But then we don't realize at the same time the way I kind of view God is
Everyone's having their own journey.
their own personal journey. Exactly.
Right.
It's almost like if we get
That
this
was
car,
a big lesson for me.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely, as I started on this journey, I wanted everyone to also be on it with me. And it was coming very much from a place of love. It was coming from a place of like, I'm finding freedom in this path. I'm finding freedom through spirituality. I want everyone else to be free. You have choices. You can be accountable for your actions. You have the ability to create the reality that you want. But like we said earlier, I'm on my 500th life. My soul been here. Everybody's not ready for that. People have to go through experiences, and I had to go through my experiences. I didn't just wake up knowing this stuff.
Right.
It was lessons. It was hard times. It was a lot of tears. It was pain. It was trauma. So everyone has to go through their experiences, and so that they can get the knowledge, make different choices, get the lessons that they're trying to learn. You can't take your lessons and try to teach somebody else from your lessons. I think there's a way where you can frame it, where you can try, you can try to convey your experiences, but you can't. People have to go through it for themselves.
And
they have to go through it for themselves.
And it's crazy, and that's super important, because I think a lot about, like, when you're a kid, or you also about when you're a kid and you want to touch a stove, and your mom's like, don't touch a stove. And it's like, we can tell people, like, even if we know better, we want to tell people, yo, I know, don't touch that stove, you're going to burn yourself.
You gotta touch the stove.
Bro, as much as I tell you, that curiosity is still in you.
Right.
Which means if you don't touch the stove, you're going to find something else to do.
Right.
Probably even worse.
Exactly.
So it's at a point where I can tell you, I can say, bro, one time I touched the stove, I got this burn mark. This might happen to you too. Not even might, it's gonna happen to you too.
Right.
Now I can give you that information.
Right.
I can give you that guidance, but it's still ultimately your decision. And if you choose to touch it, that might be even better. You touch it, you burn it. Now you know, like, I will never touch that again.
Right.
You know for yourself. You don't have that curiosity. You fulfill that, and you understood your experience.
For sure.
There's nothing I could have ever said to you that would have let you understand the fact that you don't need to touch that stove in the way that you do now that you've touched it.
Period.
And that's my TED Talk. That's my TED Talk on minding your business.
Fire. Minding your business. No,
Minding
for
your
real.
business.
And I think the other thing that I realized is that it's an act of violence. I think oftentimes we limit our idea of violence to physical touch, and we don't realize that we can be violent with our energy. And when we violate people's boundaries, it's an act of violence. And I realized that I was crossing boundaries that I shouldn't have been crossing with my friends because I wanted them to be on this journey with me. And it was coming from a place of love, but I was still crossing those boundaries. And so I was inflicting more pain and more trauma onto them